Hi, I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to the Climate Guru, where we discuss pressing environmental issues, including with leading experts. Join us for insightful conversations to inform and inspire action in your everyday life. Hi, this is Brent, the Climate Guru. The Amazon rainforest, as we know, is the largest tropical forest on the planet. It's nearly 7 million square kilometers, stretches across 9 countries in South America. What happens in the Amazon rainforest affects rainfall, climate, and ecosystems far beyond the region. The Amazon is home to more than 400 indigenous nations. They are between 1.5 to 2.7 million people, depending on the estimate. And these communities have lived in the forest for thousands of years. They've developed a deep knowledge of how to live in the forest without destroying it. They have a deep spiritual connection to the forest. In fact, there are even dozens of uncontacted groups, perhaps 50 or 60 indigenous groups who have not been contacted, have minimal contacts with the outside, who depend completely on the healthy, intact forest to survive. The indigenous territories in the Amazon make up about 30% of the Amazon forest. Studies have shown these lands have much lower deforestation rates than surrounding areas. In many cases, these indigenous forests are better protected on indigenous land than in government-managed parks. This is very important because they store enormous amounts of carbon. This helps regulate the climate. The Amazon actually stores twice as much carbon in the trees, roots, and surrounding soil than twice the amount that is given off by the entire planet every year. The Amazon rainforest helps regulate climate. It has a special system of evapotranspiration where the water comes up to the roots. It's evaporated into the air above it and creates a special river of air above the Amazon. And it protects and regulates climate on many continents. It provides the water for all of South American countries below it. When indigenous land rights are protected, the forest is more likely to remain intact and healthy. So when we protect the Amazon, which is critical to preserving biodiversity, to keeping healthy and balanced climate, preserving vast amounts of dangerous carbon dioxide, we're not just talking about trees in the Amazon. We're talking about people. Indigenous people have a special knowledge and stewardship with systems that are essential to the planet's future. The indigenous communities not only rely on the forests for their sustenance, for food found in the rivers, on land, fish, fresh water, rivers, for transportation, and also shelter. They have a deep spiritual relationship and connection to the forests. They've been there for thousands of years. And they believe that all the natural parts of the forest, trees, rivers, animals, have their own spirit. Each has their own spirit. And they believe that they are co-equals. Humans, indigenous people are co-equals with those spirits. They're not superior to them. And part of their beliefs is a deep respect to preserve the forest and keep it intact as a spiritual system equal to themselves. They don't believe that they should dominate the forest and own the forest, but rather that they are part of it and respect it and respect all the features of it that each have its own spirit. Protecting indigenous land rights is more than just a cultural and human rights issue. It's one of the most effective conservation measures that exist to preserve the important Amazon rainforest, the largest tropical forest in the world. The Amazon forest has been really under assault for many years. It's been deforested. It's estimated 17% of the forest is not intact. It's deforested. And it's estimated that if it's deforested between 20 and 25%, it could really begin to reverse, and it will start a proliferation of the creation of dry savannas. So that would be the tipping point for the Amazon rainforest, where it turns into dry savannas. It becomes a carbon source rather than a carbon sink. So at 17%, we're not far from the estimated 20 or 25% deforestation that will cause it to tip over into a dry savanna and lose all the properties that it has to store carbon, to preserve biodiversity, and all the systems of water and animals and plants. The Amazon state stabilizes weather, rainfall, and temperature far beyond South America. The Amazon trees are like a giant atmospheric engine. They recycle moisture. They release vast amounts of water vapor through their leaves through a process called evapotranspiration. A single large tree can release hundreds of gallons of water a day, which collectively the forest creates billions of tons of moisture daily. This moisture forms clouds, drives rainfall, feeds weather systems, and it provides rain and moderates climate to all the nations adjacent to and south of the Amazon, particularly Uruguay, Argentina, Chile. It also moderates climate and provides rainfall to Paraguay and southern Brazil. The moisture which is created above the Amazon is called the flying rivers. They move rain across continents, and they carry moisture thousands of kilometers away to southern Brazil and all these nations to the south, which rely upon it for agriculture, hydropower, drinking water for tens of millions of people. Without the Amazon, much of South America would be drier, closer to savanna conditions, or even deserts. The Amazon store 100 to 120 billion tons, gigatons of carbon. This is about twice as much, 57 gigatons of carbon. 57 billion tons of carbon are emitted globally by human activity. So the intact forest acts as a very important carbon sink for the planet, absorbing the CO2. But deforestation releases the stored carbon into the atmosphere. Deforestation is caused by a number of human activities, mostly agriculture, the first of which is ranching, when forests are torn down to create pasture for cattle, for beef cattle. That's the main cause of deforestation. Another one would be farming, putting in soy plantations as well as oil palm plantations. And another issue is mining for precious metals, particularly gold, into remote areas of the Amazon and its tributaries. And this encroaches often on indigenous property rights. And of course, we know that gold mining, the process of gold mining, uses mercury, which is toxic when it's released in this process into the rivers, into the land surrounding it. So when the forest loss increases of the Amazon, regional temperatures rise. Rainfall can become erratic, and droughts and fires intensify. Fires have been one of the greatest causes of loss of Amazon forest in the most recent years, and it's because of increased temperature and dryness of the forest. It's even exceeding destruction of the forest by ranching and agriculture. Deforestation actually raises local temperatures by 2 to 3 degrees centigrade, and disrupts cloud formation and weakens rainfall cycles. There are parts of the Amazon forest which are substantially deforested, and those have been studied, and they're known as carbon sources. They emit carbon rather than store carbon. They're sources rather than carbon sinks. The fear is that this could happen to much of the Amazon. A lot of it reaches its tipping point of deforestation of 20 to 25%. In the areas where indigenous people control their own territory, there's the most intact forests. Deforestation is lower. Biodiversity is higher. Carbon storage is greater. They've lived in these areas for thousands of years. They know how to protect it, and they understand its important function, and they have the special spiritual connection to the forest and all the creatures, the trees, the animals, the water, the rivers in the forest. Environmental groups, NGOs, local conservation programs, the countries that want to preserve the Amazon forest, they're making an effort to now recognizing more and more of the special knowledge that indigenous groups have in how the systems in the forest work. They've lived there for thousands of years, been an integral part of it. They understand how to preserve it. They understand the natural systems and the annual changes in the Amazon. These groups travel through large areas, sometimes pursuing game, depending on the season. So more and more, their deep understanding and a proven ability to preserve the Amazon better than any other system, including setting aside legal land areas that are preserved, they are the most effective. So we're finally recognizing their importance and learning from them. At the last Conference of the Parties 30 that took place in Brazil in November, the indigenous tribes were recognized more than ever and respected more than ever, and had a greater opportunity to sit at the table and discuss the important environmental issues, including global warming and preservation of forests around the world at these annual conferences of the United Nations. There are people around the world that are active in protecting natural areas, protecting the environment, protecting their territories. And Global Witness is an organization that keeps track of the harassment and deaths and murders of these protectors of the environment. They keep track of these activities all around the world. And sadly, the greatest number of deaths of environmental defenders are in Latin America, and many in Central America and many in the Amazon. And many of these are women and many are indigenous people who stand up to protect their natural areas, their territories. And often it involves illegal mining, gold mining and other precious metal mining that occurs throughout the Amazon, remote areas in many of the Amazon countries that includes Bolivia, in Colombia, Venezuela, where this illegal mining takes place. There are efforts by the new presidency that's been in place for 2 years in Brazil. Lula, the president, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, has made a big effort to preserve the Amazon and to protect and respect indigenous rights. At the recent COP30, Conference of the Parties 30, Brazil recognized more and more environmental territories and recognized the specific boundaries and limits of those indigenous groups, an important step forward, especially considering that the previous regime in Brazil, headed by Jair Bolsonaro, did everything he could to destroy the Amazon, allow ranchers, farmers, miners to come in, and did his best to take away the rights of indigenous peoples. When indigenous land rights are protected, the forest is more likely to remain standing. So when we're talking about protecting the Amazon, we're not just talking about protecting trees. We're talking about people, indigenous people, their knowledge, their long stewardship, their spiritual connections that are essential to the Amazon and to the entire planet's future, because the Amazon has such a huge effect and influence with the world climate. The future of the Amazon rainforest, its preservation, its health, is inseparable from the preservation of the indigenous people who are its best stewards. Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.